Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular board meeting of the Milford Exempted Village School District Board of Education. It is Thursday, November the 9th, 2023 at 6 p.m. And let's call this meeting to order. Mr. Espy, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. We're ready for the presentation of colors.
Color guard, attention. Harry, colors. Post. Ready. Post. Present. Arms.
Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Post.
Let's stand for the national anthem, please. At the football game last Friday, when they did the national anthem, it was really kind of neat and kind of touching to watch our entire student section standing up singing the national anthem. Really, really touches you when you see something like that. Okay, I need a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second?
Discussion, for discussion, we typically don't have discussion on these, but I am going to move to enter into executive session later in this meeting at an appropriate time, so it'll be after the presentations. So if there's any other discussion, call roll.
Mrs. Nolan? Yes. Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the special board meeting October 27th, 2023.
Second?
Call the roll.
Mrs. Nolan? Yes. Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the special board meeting held October 30th, 2023.
So moved.
Any discussion? Call the roll.
Mrs. Nolan? Yes. Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. We're now going to go to our presentations. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Superintendent John Spicer.
Thank you, President Miranda, members of the board.
Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, today is probably our best day of the year, especially for board meetings. We certainly love our Veterans Day programs. We'll have all kinds of visitors tomorrow at our elementary schools, and then on Monday we will have visitors at the junior high and high school. But this evening, I'd like to introduce Mr. Gary Knepp to step up to the podium and talk to us a little bit about Veterans Day.
Thank you, Mr. Spicer. I always find very much joy in coming to these board meetings under these circumstances. I spent time with them before, which are always
Can you pause and turn your mic on real
Ned,
quick?
can you- Yeah.
I always need help in this regard.
Much better, thank you.
Thank you. The war in Vietnam was fought some 8,700 miles away from Milford. 7 Milford families mourned the loss of their sons, while dozens more prayed for their sons' safe return. Protesters poured into the streets to express their rage. In their zeal to condemn the war, they unfortunately and unfairly condemned the warrior as well. The country was being pulled apart as never before since the Civil War. On May 4th, 1970, I was a sophomore at Milford High School. I was in my biology class taught by Doc Shelley, some of those you may remember Doc, when it was interrupted by the principal, Ronald Lyons, announcing that 13 students at Ohio, Kent State University had been shot by the Ohio National Guard as they peacefully protested the Vietnam War. 4 of those students died. Had it really come to this? Several weeks ago, I was looking into things that belonged to my mother, and I found a rather unusual item that I had never seen before and had never spoken about it before, but it was very expressive to me of how my mother was. This was a bracelet that was honoring the men who were missing in action and POWs in Vietnam War. As I said, my mother never spoke about this, and it was a great surprise as I looked at it, and I thought, well, this might be an interesting theme to talk about as individuals tried to get involved in helping the war effort. In 1970, 2 students at Cal State University, Carol Brown and Kay Hunter, decided that they wanted to find some way to support our troops in a non-controversial, apolitical way. And this is how the bracelet idea came apart. They were told that the Montagnard people, who were the indigenous hill people of Vietnam, wore metal bracelets around their wrists to show various things to the public and to their family members. And thus this was chosen. It had 2 different colors, one in nickel and the other copper. And the bracelets were to have the name, serial number, branch of service, and date of loss of each one of our POW MIAs who were listed from Vietnam. They wanted to make sure as many people as possible could afford it, so they charged $2.50 for each one of these bracelets. That was the price of an average movie ticket in the day, 1970. The idea was to wear these bracelets as a show of support for either MIAs and the POWs, and to wear it until the POWs return or the remains of the MIA come home. And then they were supposed to send it back to the families. And there were many families who obviously did not receive theirs back because the people were attached to them and they wanted to keep the bracelets. 3,500 names were determined as eligible as being either family members of MIAs or POWs. 1,300 families participated in this project, so there were 1,300 different names that appeared on these bracelets. The co-chair was Bob Hope and Martha Ray. I don't have to talk about Bob Hope much, but Martha Ray was a great favorite of the GIs from World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. They decided to release the bracelets on 11/11 of 1970, or Veterans Day of 1970. At the height of this bracelet sale, there were 12,000 to 15,000 sold every day in the United States. When they finished selling the bracelets in 1973, so this ran for 3 years, Approximately 4 million bracelets were sold. Among the purchasers, Richard Nixon, Johnny Cash, and Cher. Quite a cross-section of American society. Looking through some of the records, I wanted to find out just a little bit more about who Captain Sutterquist was. Just a little bit of information to put it in perspective. He was born on October the 5th, 1941 in Minnesota. He was a 1966 graduate of the Air Force Academy. On August the 23rd, 1968, he was a pilot of a Phantom X-4 jet, but it was under the call name of Semantics. He was flying out of Udorn Air Force Base in Thailand when at 8:30 p.m. they lost contact with him, and he was never found again. They heard radio intercepts from North Vietnam, and they indicated that the plane was shot down. As I mentioned earlier, Milford High School paid a very heavy price for its service in Vietnam. I'd like to read those names briefly before I move on to one other topic. Those names of the men from this area, from Milford High School, who died are Gerald Hill, Dennis Johnson, Rodney Heldeston, John Spidell, Cliff Luffler, Daniel Feck, and Richard Lay. None of these names were eligible for the bracelets because their bodies were returned. There was one, however, from Claremont County who did qualify for a bracelet, and I want to briefly talk about him. His name was Robert Gumpert. He was born in 1949. He was the oldest of 11 children. He attended New Richmond High School. He was a good athlete, played football, and loved fishing. But probably what he loved more was his red-hot muscle car that he would drive all over New Richmond, attracting lots of lady attention from what I was told, especially that from his very close friend, Gene. He was based in Quang Ngai, which is known as Pinkville at that time, because of the heavy Viet Cong presence. And they were faced with the My Lai massacre was in that same area. These men who were stationed there had lots of booby traps, sniping, and mines that made things very tense and difficult serving in that area. On June 22nd, 1970, at 7:50 in the morning, Gumpert was walking point with his squad of 6 members. Point was the man in front. They came to a gap in a hedgerow, and as Gumpert was ready to put his foot in through that hedgerow, one of his squad members shouted for him not to do so, but it was too late. A tremendous explosion followed. There were thousands of pieces of small paper that were over the space in the air where Gumpert had just been. The paper fell down like snow falling onto the ground. They were the remnants of letters from his girlfriend and family that he put in his rucksack. There was nothing left to find from Robert Gumpert. The forensic team from the Army came in and investigated and determined that the bomb crater was 18 foot in diameter, 4 foot deep, and the bomb radius blast was over 100 feet easily. After investigating it, they decided that what the explosive device, was most likely a 750-pound American bomb that did not detonate, that was refashioned by the Viet Cong into an anti-tank mine. For many years, his father had a hard time accepting his son's death. He was listed as MIA, or missing in action, and his father did not agree to that designation. And however, and he very seldom would talk about what happened to his son. When I was writing my book called Beyond the Names, I talked with Mr. Gumpert for a brief second or two, and he simply could not talk. He choked up, and this was in 2003, and he couldn't deal with the situation. I finally was able to get a photograph of him for the book from a family member who smuggled it to me. After all those years, Mr. Gumpert resolved his differences with the Army, and they changed his name, his son's classification, from MIA, missing in action, to KIA, killed in action, BNR, body not returned. In 2015, a special ceremony was held at Arlington National Cemetery where a monument was erected in Bobby Gumpert's honor. Attending that ceremony were several men from the local VVA, or Veterans of Vietnam, Veterans of America Squad 649, and stand in honor with his son. There are over 16 million Americans veterans, some of whom are still fighting to recuperate from their wounds, from their emotional and mental issues that suffered as a result of their service in community. When I see a veteran, as I think most of us do today, we want to thank them for their service. We recognize how important it was. Even those in Vietnam, we might have felt like they were short-shrifted for a long time. I think we recognize them well. But one thing I would think we would like to remember is that their service to the community did not end when they took their uniforms off. They became doctors, nurses, teachers, coaches, everyday farmers, truck drivers, you name it. They're in the community working in volunteer organizations and doing things for the community that we never know about, and that they are, say, their lifelong association with the community is helping it to thrive, as they did when they were in the military. I think about today how more and more young Americans who are going into harm's way in the Middle East. We need to think about those individuals as well before they're there and keep God's wing under the top of them. I want to read to you a short prayer that was found in the purse of Eleanor Roosevelt, the president of his wife. And after her death, this poem was handwritten on a small piece of paper. No one to this day knows the origins, whether it was Eleanor Roosevelt who wrote it or somebody else, but it was found and there and was named a wartime prayer. And I would like to thank Cliff Riley, one of my friends in the Vietnam Veterans organization, who gave this to me. Dear Lord, lest I continue my complacent way, help me to remember that somewhere, somehow out there, a soldier died for me today. As long as there be war, I must then ask and answer, am I worth dying for? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knapp. It's always a pleasure to have you come back and visit with us every year. Before we move on to the next presentation, I know that there's many of us here that work in the district are veterans or have grown up in a household that was military. Do we have anybody that's active or served in the past? Please stand and be recognized tonight. Yes, thank you. Dr. Arnold, to the microphone, please.
Thank you. I'm here to talk about the Live Oaks Milford JROTC. If you have never been to one of their events, these young people don't get enough recognition for the work they put in and what they do. Mr. Yeager and I usually try to make it a yearly event to go to at least one. Mr. Yeager usually goes to a lot of them because he's in Kentucky. I was just out in Western Brown, and let me tell you, rolling on a bed at 7 a.m. to make it over there was hard. But they were out running laps, 5Ks. I mean, when you see the things they do, it's amazing. They're a well-oiled machine, and this doesn't do enough justice for the kudos they deserve. The JROTC Raiders team competed last weekend at the Army JROTC National Raider Challenge at Fort Knox, Kentucky. The male division team and the female division team both placed first overall in the all-service division. I believe there were 200 teams plus. They competed in events such as a 5K, and it wasn't a simple 5K. There were multiple hills. Kids were dragging themselves. They came out on top. Rope bridge, the gauntlet, and cross-country rescue against top JROTC programs from across the nation. Besides winning trophies and bragging rights, each member of the championship team were awarded a 4-year full ROTC scholarship to the school of their choice. That means 28 students have the ability to attend college for free. Our female scholarship recipients, and don't get mad at me, I'm gonna probably butcher names, Sarah Brown, Rebecca Buck, Asia Camacho, Marin Davidson, Ava Davis, Ali Dossois, Emily Fiesel, Macy Fugate, Gabrielle Moore, Cecilia Marcina, Izzy Nunez, Julia Oakley, Joy Sanders, and Gabrielle Wagner. Can we give them a hand, please? Our male scholarship recipients: Michael Bailey, Brendan Baker, Ben Chandler, Joey Conley, Bryce Korn, Liam Fitzpatrick, Jacob France, Robert Mess. I'm going to screw this up. Say it one more time for me. Mersa. I'll go with you. Sorry, I apologize. Be mad at me. I'm sorry. Aaron Nolan, Colin Preher, Dylan Robinson, and Caden Thomas. They're laughing because I probably messed that one up too. It's okay. Just get me tomorrow. But again, we need to give them a hand as well.
Oh.
Did I miss some?
Two on the other page.
Yes. Who am I missing? Give it to me. White. There you go. Weiss and Worley. Give me a hand. Thank you.
All right, so it doesn't happen without their leadership, so he didn't even know he's going to have to speak.
The-
Oh, okay. I'm not alone. We brought Chief Phillips on board. He's very innovative. He's young. He's way better looking than me. Because without him, none of this would happen. The cadet corps itself is amazing. This is the best job in the world. I enjoy coming to work every day. That's why we do 65 hours a week, because right here is the future of America, right here. The future leaders of America are standing behind you to lead us into the future. And I couldn't be more proud. And I'm an old man. I plan on doing this till I'm at least 71. So that's, Chief, you got anything? You're good. Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Head, toe, right, face, forward, march.
As you guys walk out, I am our representative to Great Oaks, and you guys were mentioned there last night. I was a very proud Milford board member there. All 35 other districts were envious of the work that's done here, so nice work.
Not yet.
Last Sunday was All Saints Day at our church down in Milford, and they rang the bell. They told the bell for everyone that had passed in our congregation. One of those members was Joe Fitzwater, who was the longest living veteran here in Milford, Ohio, and maybe over a larger area other than that. But these people are passing on,
Yeah.
and we certainly appreciate their service.
All right. We do have the 2023 Ohio PBIS District Recognition. Last month we talked a little bit about PBIS and how it is implemented in each of our buildings. And then Jenny, I'm going to ask you to come to the microphone and talk a little bit about this recognition.
I said, have you? Oh, no, I got it. Well, first, congratulations again to JROTC. So always fun to watch them in the morning. And again, as Dr. Arnold said, pretty amazing to see them out in the morning, early morning, hot or cold. And thank you to all the veterans and our active servicemen. So as Mr. Spicer had shared, unfortunately, Kelly Ellison, so I'm on her behalf again, and so I want to shout her kudos out for her leadership. She is actually at CLU with her children, so I didn't want her to have to miss CLU. So I had shared. So shortly after the board meeting last month, I'm going to read that we received this email. We are writing to inform you that Milford Exempted Village School District has been awarded the District Recognition Award for the 2023 Ohio PBIS Showcase. This year's review was completed by your regional state support team consultants, and then you will be followed up with an email from ODE. So we look forward to hearing them and seeing them be recognized at a celebration, a regional celebration on November 16th. So I do want to highlight that out of state support team 13, which is really the 4-county region area here, Butler, Warren, Claremont, and Hamilton. There were only two districts that received this award. One of those were us, and the other was Forest Hills, and there are actually only 17 districts across the state. So again, just the hard work. You saw the individual work of the schools and their awards, but actually Linda Davey back there started this work in 21-22, and then last year Kelly moved into that role and finished up in 22-23, created a district dashboard, a district handbook, created an action plan, and continues to work through that. So that hard work is certainly paying off as we see that recognition. So thanks to all the team is probably about 20 to 25 members throughout the school community that are all working on that district team and recognition. So questions, thoughts, just continued good work. I was at the preschool today and saw, I think, a 3-year-old being awarded for her, for meeting her pillars at the preschool. So certainly established, and we're seeing it from PK to 12. So thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. All right, our final presentation is the Citizens Advisory Commission. Patrick Szymanski could not be here this evening, so he did send me a statement that he would ask me to read. The CAC met at their regularly scheduled monthly meeting at the end of October. 4 groups were established, 3 carried over from the prior year: staff retention and diversity, student programs, technology and facilities, and the group added a 4th one, communications. Each group has 7 to 8 members. During the October meeting, each group elected a team leader to drive the discussions, review, and deliverables. Each group will also create an action plan to measure its progress toward a committed deliverable for the 23-24 session. Additionally, Superintendent Spicer has aligned someone from the administration staff to support each group. At the October meeting, each group brainstormed ideas, deciding on one topic to fully explore and research. The administrative staff member will assist by providing the requested data and share results with specific group utilizing share folders. The team then review the data and be prepared at the next meeting for more detailed discussion of the topic. One of this year's goals is to make sure the team members do some work outside of the team meeting. The team leaders will make sure the team is looking at the data ahead of time and, when required, interfacing during the month to make the actual meeting more productive. We look forward to the update of the board monthly with group details starting February 2024. And that's it for presentations.
Okay, let's move ahead to our first public commentary.
I have none.
Okay. Given that, I would like, said I was going to make a motion for executive session. I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda to enter into executive session for the following purpose. Matters required to be kept confidential by federal law, federal rules, or state statutes by Division G5 of Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. This is a 2-step process. First thing, we need to amend the agenda, and then we need a motion to go into executive session. So would you call the roll, please?
We'll need a motion and a second first.
I need a motion and a second.
Second.
I don't think there's going to be any discussion on this.
We're doing executive session now, not at the end.
We will be doing it in just a few minutes, yes.
Mrs. Nolan? Yes. Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes. Now I need a motion to enter into executive session for the following purpose. Once again, matters required to be kept confidential by federal law, federal rules, and state statutes by Division G5 of Section 121.22 of the Iowa Revised Code. I need a motion.
So moved.
Again, I expect no discussion, so call the roll.
Before we move,
Yes.
maybe you want to share with the group approximately how long we expect to be
I was
absent?
going to do that after
Okay.
we voted to go into executive session.
Great.
Call the roll.
Mrs. Nolan? Yes. Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. We will be going into executive session at this point. We believe it's going to last about 15 minutes, and then we will be back to you as quickly as we can. Hopefully, it's a little sooner than that and not too much after that. So please stay tuned, and we'll be back to you as quickly as we can. And we are back. Thank you for waiting so patiently for us. I need a motion now to end executive session.
So moved.
Call the roll.
Mrs. Nolan? Yes. Mrs. Mason? Yes. Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. Going to move ahead to the treasurer's report. Treasurer John Espy.
Thank you, President Miranda and members of the board. Please just sit tight while we get the presentation up. I can go ahead and go through the monthly financial report. It just won't be on the screen. And then we'll, I think, pause and make sure we get the 5-year forecast presentation up there if that's okay with the board.
Okay.
All right. Looking at October monthly analysis, we're 33.3% through fiscal year 24, which is 4 months. All funds are below that percentage in terms of funds expended, except for our one-time funds and our in and out miscellaneous local grants, athletics, and miscellaneous federal grants. In terms of expenditures, our expenditures are tracking $1,749 under the forecasted amount for a 99.9% accuracy. On revenues, local taxes are up $16,711, variance to the forecasted amount, and that's a positive, again, positive variance, tracking at 99.99% accuracy. When we look at the operating fund, we are showing $236,618.87 in month to date, and then $658,395.13 in fiscal year to date. When we look at the bond and COPS fund, month to date was $414,678.29 for a fiscal year to date of $1,023,411.55. When we look at financial items that were going on last month as well as this month, closing out federal grants from fiscal year 23, we're also in the process of closing out fiscal year 23 auxiliary funding for St. Mark's and St. Elizabeth, St. Andrews, St. Elizabeth Ann Seton. So we expect that to be done by the 15th, which is the due date for that. Later this month, actually the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, I'm going to be meeting with Strategic Solutions, and they're going to be picking up our electronic, they're going to be picking up our paper files to electronically index them. That's the company that's going to be taking our employee files and indexing them and putting them into their software that is, backed up and actually triple redundancy on backup. But it's going to allow us to eliminate our paper files here in the board office. We anticipate to eventually do that with student records, and just really any record. We'll be able to actually load in vendor contracts that will email us when the contract is 90 days from expiration. So it really helps a lot of processes, and we're excited about that. We also started monthly meetings with the state software design team on our transition to the new financial software that is projected to save the district $80,000 per year. I wanted to kind of go over the levy millage as we talked about in January of 2023 and then again at the October 2023 meeting. When we looked at millage, the millage requests in January of 2023, we projected that it would be an 8.51 mil ask. In 2024, that went to 10.58 mils, and in 2025, went to 10.9 mils. When we updated that in terms of the ask of the community in November of 2023, that was 5.99 mils, then 7.37 mils in 2024, and 8.95 mils in 2025. So essentially the millage goes up the longer we wait to ask the community. And that was really why we had asked for the 5.99 in 2023, was to have that essential purchasing power. So I think we're in a moment now. I want to make sure this is on the screen. So that's the millage that I was just discussing with the 8.51 early on going out to 10.9, and then the 5.99 going out to 8.95. So we're in a moment now where I think some next steps are needed, and so I've put down you'll notice that they all say 111, but they're actually 123 on my screen, so I don't know what happened there. Probably a formatting issue, but they are 123. So the first item is to verify the new district valuation with the county auditor. So I've spoken to the deputy auditor, and she's going to be in Monday and Tuesday of the week of Thanksgiving, so I'm going to be working with her to get the final valuation. So just to let everyone know how that process works, cards were mailed out to the community with information about valuations. However, until the Department of Taxation accepts the county's numbers, they're not set in stone yet. So what we're basically waiting is for the Department of Taxation to accept those rates and valuations from the Clermont County Auditor. Once that happens, the Deputy Auditor is going to communicate to me what our valuation is, because that allows us to figure out what our needs are, and then convert that into potential millage for the 2024 calendar year. So that's what I'm going to be doing the week of Thanksgiving. I'm going to be inputting that data and kind of building those models. My suggestion is that we have a special board meeting the week of November 27th for me to bring that back to the board and start to make some decisions. I think at that point as well, we would bring to the board some potential reductions that the board could consider if the millage were to be less than the equivalent of the 5.99 mils. And I will also suggest that the board take action at that meeting or very soon after, because of the amount of time it takes to prepare documents if the board would like to put a March ballot item or levy on. Because March is a primary election, and so when we look at this, there's a quick turnaround, and December 20th is the filing deadline. So just want to make sure that we're kind of hearing that.
We open for discussion here?
Yeah, I think this would be a good spot to discuss.
Okay, fantastic. So I think our community understands that our levy failed Tuesday. It was our first time out. This district's never passed a levy in over 40 years on the first time out. In fact, Mr. Miranda, how long have you lived in the district?
A long time, about 40 years, 45 years almost.
You didn't have to answer that. You could have said a long time.
I'm not ashamed of it.
But you have shared with this board and several others the history of levies in this district. And what have you consistently said?
Got to be the same number.
What have you consistently said about which one normally passes? We put it on the first time, it usually doesn't pass. It hasn't in 40 years. What normally happens on the second one?
You get a better result, whether or not you pass it.
You've said specifically it normally doesn't pass the second time. You've said that. The third or the fourth time is when this district normally passes a levy. I'm not predicting that the second levy is not going to pass. I'm just sharing with you this district's history. And it can't be denied that if we put a levy on the ballot for March, the chances of it passing historically has not been favorable. So I just wanted to just make sure that we were aware of that. And if we are aware of that, and Mr. Espy has done a great job at sharing with us the results of levies not passing. It means that the district consistently moves farther and farther in debt because we are currently in deficit spending, correct?
Yes.
So the ask back out to the community is a higher burden on our taxpayers the longer we wait. If history serves us like it has, the March levy will face another uphill battle. It's not a fatalistic comment, it's just history. And it could change in March if that's the decision that's made, and I don't think that I personally will be able to stop that, that levy hitting the ballot, because I'm one of 5. So I believe a spring levy's coming for this district. I poked my head on the State of Ohio report card the other day, and I found a pretty interesting statistic I want to share with this community. And it's percentage of spend on classroom instruction. And it currently says that the Milford School District spends 69% on classroom instruction, and it's, I want to say 29th out of 45 comparable schools. Are you familiar with that statistic?
Yes.
Okay. The #1 school in the state is Upper Arlington. It's a suburb of Columbus, and they spend 77% of their income on classroom instruction. These are comparable schools. The state has deemed them comparable. We're at 69%, they're at 77%. What that essentially identifies is that our district is spending 69 cents of every dollar on the classroom, and Upper Arlington is spending 77 cents of every dollar on the classroom. That tells me there's an opportunity for us as a district to turn that percentage a little bit more in the favor of the classroom, in the favor of the kids, in the favor of the teachers, in the favor of the parents. So I'm not advocating for anything that reduces services for our kids. That includes things like, from a Partnership for Milford Schools message that went out prior to this levy, if this levy doesn't pass, we could be facing a cut of $2 million in services next year, a reduction in teachers and busing, and that busing includes within 2 miles of the school. So that means young people could be walking to school in an unsafe situation. Cuts will lead to larger class sizes. Programming like AP honors and music, art, and PE could face and probably will face cuts. Also, extracurricular funding as well as increase for pay to play. This was all in text messages to the community. And I would argue it could be perceived as veiled threats to pass a levy. It may or may not feel that way to our community. But I will say, beyond no uncertain terms, am I supporting any cuts to services for our kids, any cuts to our teachers, and any cuts to busing? I want to make that very, very clear. I will not support that as one of 5 up here. I don't know if my fellow board members will support those things, so we have to ask ourselves, In that other 31% of spend that is not on classroom instruction, where's the opportunity to reduce costs? Busing is in part of that 31%, is that correct?
Yes.
So if we remove busing from that 31%, there's other opportunities there that we need to look very, very closely at. And I just wanted to share that, again, with this community. I do not support anything that's going to harm these kids. I don't want to take away a dime of services, and I don't want to harm the teachers. I stand with all of you. There's other places we can look, and in fact, it's interesting. I've been asked by a couple members of the community, where's it at? Where's it at? Show me, show me. Well, I'm actually going to make a public request today of Mr. Espy. I would like a ledger of every one of our expenses for last year to the dollar, the intricate details, tomorrow. And I'm going to be reviewing that, and I'm going to be doing my own analysis of recommendations of where this district may be able to improve that ratio to catch up to schools like Upper Arlington that have a 77 cents of every dollar going to their classrooms. I just wanted to share that very quickly. That is a request that, again, I wanted to make public to the dollar. I want to see that because I think there's opportunities there. And if there's not, I guess I won't find it. But I think we might be able to find some opportunities that will lessen the perceived burden that we keep sharing with this taxpayer community. So I'm going to pause there for a second. And of course, if anyone knows me, I'm wide open for this discussion. I just want to make my position very clear to this community, to my fellow board members, and to the administration.
Just to clarify, do you want fiscal year 23 or fiscal year 23 or?
22, 20, whatever our last one that you have a full ledger of books.
23.
Yeah, 22, 23. Yeah, because we're still in the middle of this year.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're in fiscal year 24, so
Yeah,
it'll be
so
fiscal year
23, please.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the request, and I appreciate it. You've been amazing in that role. You've been very responsive to all of my requests, and from what I understand, the rest of the board have asked you for several things. I don't know how you've cloned yourself, but you've done a great job, and I appreciate that ask. This should be close to at your fingertips. It should not take days and weeks. I think we can get it tomorrow on a thumb drive, and I'd appreciate that.
I can have it to you in 10 seconds.
I thought so. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I would also make a request that you don't just send it to Mr. Combs, you send it to everyone.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Yeah, and I also want to point out that the community can get out on Open Checkbook, and all of our data's out there as well. So it will be in a different format than Checkbook, but it's all out on Ohio Online Checkbook.
I'm guessing that's going to be by account.
Yeah, it'll be by expenditure account.
Okay, fair enough.
I'll do some pivot tables too, so you can see it by fund. So
Yeah, I want to see
Might be
I want
20
to see more
seconds.
than high level. I want to see the details of the dollars,
okay.
every dollar.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right.
I do want to point out that we all sit in a lot of these finance meetings every month, these committee meetings, and we talk about how to cut things. I can only speak for myself, but I don't feel like anyone in those committee meetings wants to cut student services. I certainly don't as well. I think where those numbers came from that were on the website about busing and AP classes and smaller class sizes going away, I feel like those came from the idea that we will have to make large cuts if this levy did not pass, and that is where we could make large cuts, and it would be most impactful for our budget. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think really the way we've looked at it is the expenditures, when we reduce, it's going to affect people, and it could potentially affect busing. So people is very broad. I mean, those are the words that have come out of my mouth, is people or busing. I know that Mr. Spicer said the same thing. So, I mean, that's been our message all along. I think now we're to the point where we talk about maybe a March or a November levy. Well, not going in March means that there are going to have to be reductions made prior to next school year. March at least allows potential to have less reductions going into next school year. And that's, I think, the importance and what this board needs to weigh between a March levy or a
We're waiting.
November levy.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll add my 2 cents. When I became a board member, within like the first 2 weeks, I sat down with Brian Ray, and I think John Spicer was in that meeting. And I said, before I even knew about all the details of being a board member, that I would never support cutting busing, because I think it really impacts.
I just want to make sure your mic is on. I don't know if it is.
Anyway, I said, like 2 weeks into this board role, I would never support cutting busing because that impacts so many families. And I feel like when you get down to the nuts and bolts of education, there are 2 absolute critical pieces, and that's kids and teachers. Without either one of those, you don't have school. And then you start adding other things in. So I would never be in favor of impacting teachers or kids. I do have a question on busing. What is our approximate total spend on busing for a year?
It's around 6 million.
Around 6 million, and we get about 2.5 million from the state.
Correct.
So if we cut busing, that is giving back $2.5 million of support that we get as a district, which seems we're always saying like we want more from the state, we want more from the state, and we're getting 2.5 million from the state towards that service. So I will always have that in the back of my mind as well.
I do want to point out that reducing busing would potentially, and it's not potentially, it would affect how much we do get from the state. So it would be, I don't know that it's proportional, but I think it's something that, if that's something that the board would entertain, and it doesn't, I mean, it sounds like at least 2 are not interested in that, but if you wanted to look at the numbers of how it would affect if there were busing reductions, I could model that based off of what those reductions would look like.
So I'm thinking before this special meeting the week of November, we probably need to have a work session to just hash out a lot of details on conversation about that, unless we want to do it all at that special meeting. I mean,
I think it makes sense to do it at one meeting, because he'll have a better idea of the millage and what the county is saying, so that when he says when we start looking at numbers, he'll be able to.
That's fine. As long as we allocate enough time that it's not like a come in quick and vote and leave, that we have enough time for discussion and weighing options and all of that. Because I think when we look at the entire education system, you've got your buckets, right? You've got kids, teachers, parents, their stakeholders. We've got supplies, busing, administration, and we just need to find the right mix of we have to cut something. Unfortunately, nobody wants to. We're deficit spending, and we have been. The community spoke, unfortunately. And so, just like we would do in our homes, you just can't keep spending money you don't have. So while nobody wants to cut anything, we have to cut something, and we don't want it to be kids or teachers. So we need to go from there.
I think that this is all sounding very simple, and it's a very complex thing. I think it's not so easy to just say, like, we can't cut these things. We have a budget. We have a budget we need to work with, and we may not have a lot of choice of what we can cut, which is why this levy was so important in the first place, and why our treasurer has been telling us all along that it was really important to pass this levy. I mean, we should definitely look at everything, but I think the reason we needed this levy to pass is because we never wanted to cut services for students, and we never wanted to cut anything in the classroom. We may have to do that now because the levy didn't pass. And of course, like, we will work through all the numbers and everything, but I just think it's important to know that sometimes our hands may be tied in this situation
And I have a quick question here. I believe you said $6 million on busing? We cannot pen stroke eliminate $6 million because we can only go to state minimum, correct?
If it was state minimum, we would save about $1 million.
I was thinking it was somewhere around $800,000.
And we are projected this year to be $6 million deficit spending, just to put that into perspective.
So we cannot, as a district, just call up Peterman and say, well, we're not going to use any buses anymore.
Right, so we're under contract, but the contract does allow renegotiation. So if we were to go down a certain percentage of routes, there would be a renegotiation, and potentially those routes that remain would be at a higher percentage because Peterman has to also make sure that they're staffed appropriately. And if they feel like they're, we're setting the need of busing as we do now, that wouldn't look the same if we made reductions.
So I saw a newspaper article about busing in the communities, and our expenditure was pretty high compared to other districts surrounding. And I saw it quoted in the article that we've had this contract for like 20 years or something, and I don't have it pulled up to quote it, but I think maybe that's something we dive into deeper and cost assess how other districts that are doing it for less. I saw Forest Hills mentioned that they drive more miles than we do for less money. I don't know if it hasn't been fully evaluated in 20 years. Maybe we need to look at busing option. I think we just have to put everything on the table.
Well, we did do a request for proposals for the contract, and we got one bid, and it was Peterman. We also took a time to decide if there was something that we could afford to bring back in-house, and we can't. You're talking about $125,000 per bus to bring that back in-house, plus everything else. We can, my comment to you is we cannot cut our way to deficit spending. There's a funding formula problem, and I know there are at least 2 guys that have made contact with multiple legislators to voice that. This community needs to understand we cannot cut our way out of this. It's that simple.
So there's 2 comments, and I appreciate that John, because the busing doesn't feel like a home run unless it's cut hard. Like if you're going to use busing as a lever to reduce costs, it's a hard cut. I stated earlier that I'm not in support of that in any way, shape, or form, nor am I in support of cutting teachers, nor am I in support of doing any type of special services to the kids, AP, honors, PE, art, or music. If I'm also not in support of busing, that doesn't leave too many other places to cut. So we need to look really hard at what's left. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, we do.
We need to look very hard at what's left, and we need to find out if there's opportunities there with what's left. And I don't, it's funny because I get people in the community ask me, what's your number? What's your number? What do you know? I will just simply say, let's dig in deeper than we ever have. We had a levy that passed. Every day that goes by is tougher and tougher and tougher for us. And I think that we owe it to the community to find and turn over every single rock and protect the things that we care most about. And I'm happy to find out more, because when I see a comparable district like Upper Arlington, the best in our comp at 77%, I'm never going to ignore that. They're finding a way to take 77 cents of every dollar and put it towards classroom instruction. We're finding a way to put 69. There's a delta there that I'll never ignore. I don't think that we recoup 8% in one fell swoop, but I believe that we need to work on finding a way to make that ratio more favorable for our taxpayers.
I wanted to point out transportation costs. I pulled this yesterday, and kind of in response to the article that I read, And these are the numbers of the top 20 districts' expenditures in Claremont, Hamilton, and Warren counties. So when we look at these numbers, I'm not sure how the number that was reported came out, but this is the number that came from ODE's finance reports out of our analytics software. And so this is where we stack up. So I think this is important to see this. This is driven on the function, which, without getting too in the weeds in the reporting, it's the function, it's part of the coding that we utilize, which is 2800 for transportation. So this is later on in my 5-year forecast presentation, so we'll get to that at some point, but since we brought that up, I wanted you to see this. I'm going to jump back to the beginning of the 5-year forecast. Given that was the board report, so actually I have a couple more slides I forgot about. So a levy collection timeline, obviously we talked about last meeting having scenario A or scenario B. We're now in scenario B, where we lose the entire 2024 calendar year for collections. So if there were a March levy passage or a November levy passage, the collections would not start until 2025. And that reason right there is why you see the millage change from that 5.99 to a 7.37 based off of the numbers I showed you a little bit earlier. It's that missed collection period of calendar year 2024.
And I believe when I went to vote, it was listed at $7.1 million.
$7.158 million, but
that we have lost because we didn't pass it in November.
Correct. It would have been phased in. We would have received half of it at the end of this fiscal year, and then we would have received that full amount starting next fiscal year, just because we have calendar years versus fiscal years.
And John, how far are we over budget on the construction?
We're projected to be 10 million.
10
Right now,
million.
as we sit, 5.7 million.
But 10 when we're finished?
That we've had to commit. So anything, I mean, we have 10 million now saved due to the COPS borrowing. So anything that is not used would be applied towards those debt payments. And when we look at this, this is really the revenue that we're losing with the failure. So if you look at this red line, that is where we go negative. This is $0 right here. That's where we go negative with the failure versus if it would have passed, it would have kept our cash balance up and positive through fiscal year 2028. So I just want to, I think this is a good visual to see kind of what the effects are of Tuesday and how we'll have to look forward.
And we'll have a new line in between there with a March or a November. It would be somewhere.
Yeah, I'll be able to compare similarly, as we go forward.
And when are you going to get inside millage forecasting? Soon?
Thanksgiving.
Like the valuations?
As soon as I get those valuations,
With-
but I already forecasted actually 42% because that's the number I had. So it could actually come down a little bit because we've been hearing that it's between 36 and 39%.
So you took the top end and it may be a little lower.
Well, that's the best information we had
No,
at the time.
I get it,
so,
but-
yeah.
You'll know something soon.
Mhm. And I do want to say with this forecast, I should say I did back it off. So May forecast, I took 42%. This forecast is at 36 on the low end.
Okay.
So we could, if we end up being at 39, it could come up 3%. But as we know, with a 36% increase, we were seeing 2.47% total growth in our tax revenues.
And
So I think
and
that's
again,
important.
just if you want to share really quickly in 5-10 seconds, inside versus outside millage, we don't get the benefit of
Yeah, so 11% of our 11% of our millage is inside millage, and that's inside the state constitution. And so that means there's no reduction factor on that 11%. Conversely, on the 89% that's outside millage, outside is referring to outside the state constitution. So all of that is considered voted millage. So that millage is voted on just like this past levy was voted on, and that has a reduction factor. So that's House Bill 920. So when the property value goes up, the effective millage goes down, and essentially on that 89%, the school district collects the same amount of funds.
Yep. You get 7.15 mills if we had passed this levy, and it doesn't matter if you've got 2,000 homes or.
This last levy was a little different. It was a fixed sum, so we were gonna collect 7.158 million, and the auditor would adjust the millage up or down, likely down, as the property value goes up.
But net, when we have property value increases, we don't get dollar for dollar relief for all of that. We get a small percentage that's defined in inside millage.
You get $1 of every 9 gets increased.
For inside
Yes.
millage.
Yes.
A couple other things I was just thinking of. You know, we need to look for every dollar in every place right now, and if we look at the useful shelf life or lifespan of different items. Like last month, I think it was October, we voted for the new computer refresh. I don't remember off the top of my head how much that was.
68,000, I believe.
68,000. We do a rotating computer refresh, rotating basis. But I know Google just came out with that article saying that Chromebooks have a shelf life or lifespan of 10 years. So maybe we need to cancel that order and use the computers an extra year or two, and you know, 68,000 here, 68,000 there, adds up over time. And then the other thing is we need to really think about, it didn't land on our agenda for today, but I was actually really a little ticked off at our committee meeting last week when a proposition came before us to spend $8,000 on professional musicians because we have a renovated auditorium. That doesn't help our kids at all, bringing in professional musicians, because it would be cool in the renovated, like, we need to get rid of non-essentials, and that couldn't be more a non-essential. It would be cool, yeah, so would Bengals players working with a football team, but we can't afford it. So I think everyone needs to just be cognizant of what I considered that was a ridiculous ask.
So with that, we would need a motion to approve my board report.
It's been so long, I had forgotten, I'm sorry. Okay, we need a motion to approve the board report that was just submitted to us.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion? More discussion? Call roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you.
Now moving into the 5-year forecast presentation. As we look at requirements, this used to not be a requirement for boards to approve these, although Milford has always, Milford's board has always approved these in the past. So this is looking at just the general fund. We have a multitude of different funds, but as you can see, I'm highlighting the general fund because that's what this 5-year forecast looks at. When you look at the actual 5-year forecast document that gets submitted to ODE, you'll see the red section that I highlighted is actual 3 years, so that's going to be fiscal year 21, 22, and 23. And then we see the average change that looks between those years and the forecast going forward. Forecast going forward is the blue section with fiscal year 24 going out to fiscal year 28. This is the first forecast that actually shows fiscal year 28. When we look at drivers of this forecast, we have the Fair School Funding Plan. You've seen this slide or something similar to it before. I will say with the valuation increase, we're looking at going down 2% from state funded. We were at 36%. We're projected to go to 34%. That's because the state essentially looks at our valuation and says, your valuation went up, you have the ability now with your local valuation to fund at a higher level.
So that equates to, with an 80 million budget, that equates to 1.6 million, am I correct there?
What the, are you talking the 2%?
The 2% loss, yes.
Well, the 80 million budget, we're not getting it all from the state. So we have to look at the percentage that we get from the state, which would be, are you talking like in total?
Every percent
Yes,
on that
I
pie,
understand.
every percent on that pie chart is $800,000.
Yes,
So if we get 2% less from the state, we've lost $1.6 million with the fair school funding.
correct, correct.
Okay.
It's also important to note that the plan, the base cost actually looks at it uses student and teacher ratios of minimum staffing levels. This is all kind of a moot point for us though, because we're on what's called the guarantee. So any of these numbers that go into effect, like now that it's looking at actual 22 costs, it doesn't update for us because we're essentially looking back at 17, 18 numbers because of the formulas that were kick the can down the road for 2 years, and then the fair school funding plan goes into effect and it doesn't work for us, so we're back on the guarantee. So I do think it's still important to see this. When you look at now the fair school funding plan dollars that we get from the state, the tan section at the bottom are our unrestricted dollars that the board can choose to use however you see fit. And then the green section is our success and wellness dollars and our DPIA dollars, which are economic disadvantaged. You can see that over time, this green section does get a little bit smaller, but baked into that green section, those are like our funding for our mental health interventionists. And so those funds are used for success and wellness, solely to fund that program. So as the green section gets smaller, the overall amount goes up, but that means that some of the unrestricted dollars would have to shift and actually be used to fund that. When we get into the forecast summary, this is really the main driver, and I think it's pretty clear depiction. The yellow is the cash balance, and the black section is our revenue, the gray section is our expenditures. So the further that the gray bars get away from the black bars, our cash drops. I do want to say when I started here in January, when we were looking at 2027 projections, we were at, I think, negative 2.6 million on one of the first iterations of the forecast I did. So now that's positive, so it's ever so slightly, it's positive right there. It's about 1.6 million, I believe. But now when you get it out here into 28, the wheels really do fall off there, and we see a negative 13.58 million cash balance. This is an abbreviated forecast, so it kind of takes the large document that we see that is submitted to the state and breaks it down in this way, where you could see what the cash balance does here on this line, and that actually becomes the beginning amount for the next year. So if we were to see 29, we would see that we're that deficit of 15 million right there would balloon likely into 18, 19, 20 million and go even further negative on the cash balance. As I said earlier, that 6 million deficit that we're looking at right there, that's what I referenced earlier when we were having our conversation about transportation. When we get into revenues and we look at the specific portion of revenues, so we have local taxes at 52%, state funding at 38%, and then all other revenue at 9%. All of the revenue would be our TIF payments, it would also be our interest payments, and it would also be donations. So that's what's making up that smaller subset. When we look at revenues over time, this is going back to 2019 and then going all the way up to 2028. You can see that the revenues do kind of flatten out. You'll notice that 2022 went down a little bit. I believe that was the second phase-in of the cuts by Governor DeWine that were COVID-related. So you can see how those revenues dropped. Property taxes, this drops here because we started breaking out our tangible personal property. So this is, these really didn't drop. It's part of the tangible personal property that actually makes up that. So if you were looking at total property taxes, you would see a trend that goes similar to what I'm outlining there. Collection rates, so when we looked at our collection rates from 2022, and that's tax year 2022 collected in 2023, we had a 97.7% delinquent or collection rate. So the inverse of that would be the delinquencies, and now we're getting closer to 99%, and that's projected to go forward. Unrestricted state aid, as I talked about, that was the tan section that I referenced on the prior chart. You can see that now unrestricted dropped because that was when the Fair School Funding Plan went into effect. So, you know, the district had kind of been all over the place. Again, this was COVID related in terms of cuts from Governor DeWine, and then there was an actual reduction in that reduction in 2021. And then Fair School Funding Plan went into effect here. When we look at restricted, now you can see conversely our restricted went from in 2021, this lower number, all the way up to 2.5 million. So this is essentially the Fair School Funding Plan being enacted.
And to clarify this restricted aid, this is that if we accept state aid, this is how we have to spend it. It's very, very specific. So it's restricted to be spent on certain things. It's just a bit of a definition here for restricted aid.
Yeah, economic disadvantage and success and wellness. Success and wellness is really tied to a lot of mental health initiatives by Governor DeWine. When we look at all other revenues, you can see that there's this big dip right here. This is because we had a delayed TIF payment in 2022 that actually came in July of 20. It should have arrived, I believe, in May or June of 2022, and it arrived in July of 2022. So you can see that how that affected it. But if you kind of extrapolate those years as anomalies, you can see that those numbers are fairly flat. When we look at expenditures here, we have personnel cost at 73%, purchase services at 20%, and all other expenditures at 7%. The board at the Finance Committee meeting had asked that I kind of show the portion of that purchase services that are related to busing, and that's what that little dash black line is right there. This is in response to the article that came out, I believe, on Monday, looking at our transportation cost per pupil. So this comes directly from a data warehouse that is based off of ODE's finance reports, and I pulled all the districts in our surrounding counties and kind of showed where we fit into the top. I actually pulled the top 20 in terms of costs, and that's where we fit in.
Are some of the costs that fall off, like I don't see Forest Hills or Oak Hills, is that because they own their busing as opposed to contracting it out? Or is there a difference?
When we spoke with Jeff Johnson, our Director of Business Operations, I think he had reached out to Forest Hills and they had not made bus purchases in a long period of time. When you look at our Peterman contract, it's got the capital expenditures kind of baked into that contract. So we don't purchase buses, they purchase the buses, and that's all part of that contract. So for contracting our busing, we have a very predictable cost of our busing in terms of the capital expenditures as well as the staffing. Whereas if we employed our own bus drivers and we used our own buses, if a bus goes down, you're spending over $100,000 for another bus. And it's very unpredictable, and I've done the survey, or I've done all of the surveys with the state to find out how to create a plan for those, and it's not fun, and you can do all of those, all of that analysis, and sometimes you just have a bus that breaks down.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a big piece of capital expenditures in districts.
And doesn't the fuel cost sit outside of Peterman as well?
It does. We do pay for our own fuel.
And so that's fluctuated the past 3 years,
Correct.
thanks to current administration.
So when we look at expenditures over time, it looks quite different than our revenues, where we're seeing those steady increases. You'll see that if you look at this bar chart over here where we see 2023 versus 2028, salaries actually drop in terms of a percentage, benefits go up. So this is something that we're continuing to monitor with our consortium. I was on a webinar today presenting with the administrator of our consortium, Haran, and by all of the people, all the representation of the districts on it, our consortium is considered the gold standard. So even with that gold standard, we're still seeing this increase in benefits, and it's really tied to the consumption and just the underlying cost of insurance itself. So that's something that we're continuing to monitor and do everything we can. For instance, we do biometrics here in the district. We have the highest percentage of turnout of any district in the consortium, any of the districts in the consortium that take part in that, and that's preventative care and identifying major health issues before they become out of control, and that's important for our staff. We look at our personnel costs. This is looking at the step motion that we see with our staff, the increases that we see, as well as negotiated percentage base increases, and that's all kind of baked into this personnel cost.
What are the last, excuse me, what are the last years of our existing contracts?
We're going to be negotiating with our classified union in the spring, and then we have 2 more years with our certified union.
So the contract with classified runs out in 2024
Yeah,
and
6/30/20.
2026.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And again, here's employee benefits, and this is part of the reason you see that bar chart change. So we had a 5.6% increase in the 2024 calendar year. And again, this is a little bit of a challenge because I'm showing you fiscal years here, but our calendar years are when our plan years are. So when we have an increase starting in January of 5.6%, then that's going to really affect 2 fiscal years, and it only affects 6 months of this fiscal year. So that's all kind of baked into these numbers and these projections. Purchase services, you'll notice in 2021 there was a spike. That was because we had the roofing project of the 4-pack elementary schools, and then they dropped back and are now we're just seeing the percentage growth that we are expecting. I will say this also has our expected costs of the traffic light and also our SRO increases that are part of this forecast now, which they were not part of the May forecast because we didn't know about them at that time.
Did you bake the traffic light into across 3 years? Is that what you did here?
No, I had it hit in 1 year.
Okay.
So it's actually part of, it's part of fiscal year 26, so 25, 26. Yeah, that's what that spike is.
Okay.
So, I mean, I put it here, it could end up being in this year, but that would just move over.
Okay.
Now, is that just the traffic light, or is that for the road expansion that is required for it as well?
It was the whole amount
The whole
that I received from, or an estimate that I received from Mr. Johnson. When we look at supplies, we had a spike here in 23. Part of this is because we ran out of COVID funds during this time, or we started allocating them differently than supplies. Also, there was a curriculum adoption that we actually had better pricing on in fiscal year 23 instead of waiting to 24. So that is why you kind of see this anomaly year in supplies. I do want to say supplies is our smallest section of expenditure. So when you see this increase, it looks like a lot, but when you're talking about the small piece of the pie that this is, I just don't want to, I don't want it to feel overstated, but we are aware that happened. And again, that was curriculum, but big piece of that was COVID funds being expended and being allocated for the rest of our HVAC contract to put an HVAC upgrade in the high school that was needed, and also that curriculum purchase.
What percentage of that jump was attributed to COVID, the COVID funds versus the curriculum?
I could go back and I can send you a graphic that will actually show the 507, which is the coronavirus relief funds, with, the ESSER funds with the general fund. So it would be like a bar chart that would have that.
It was larger, though, with the curriculum, wasn't it, if you compare the two?
Yeah,
Wasn't
curriculum
that-
was definitely a larger piece
The
of
larger
it.
piece of it is,
Yeah.
is what's I mean, if you want to
Correct.
say what's the majority of the contributing factor to that spike, it's the curriculum.
Yeah, and I will also say that our federal funds, even smaller section of that, was federal funds that we had the year before. We didn't get the same allocation. So we got a smaller allocation, so then you have to shift the supply funds that would typically be outside of the general fund to inside the general fund.
Mr. Espy?
Yes.
Just looking at chart after chart, and I appreciate all the work, but as I'm looking at this, and it goes back to 2019 and up to 2028, is that correct?
Yes.
It's a little fuzzy in my poor old eyes here. That, I'm trying to interpolate here while I'm sitting at the table. It looks like about a 2% or 3% increase every year, if
Yeah.
that is the scale.
3%.
So that kind of, what we're seeing in growth here, the 1 year aside, is pretty much inflation, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It's actually less than inflation.
So
But-
we are doing some things that are reducing costs, but it's overcome by events here.
Right, and I would say that even though you look at 2023, I mean, the curriculum that was purchased there was at a cost savings. That's the reason we did it that way, and that
Mhm.
was a conscious decision. We know, that the subset of numbers and supplies is gonna look like this, but it was for cost-saving measures, because if we would have waited till a later time, you would have seen 24 go up way
But in
further.
general, your forecast out beyond that looks like a couple of percent a year.
Yes.
Okay.
And again, supplies are a very, very small part of our budget, relatively speaking. We got an $80 million business here, and
Talking, yeah.
But as you roll back through the other charts, you're seeing
yeah.
effects of inflation, and inflation in the last couple of years have been pretty significant, so the fact that we're maintaining it all is.
Yeah,
is
supplies also, I mean, bus fuel is in here. So I think that's another piece
packed in
too.
there. Okay.
Transfers and advances, these come up because this is where we're transferring out to our bond fund to actually pay back that COPS loan. So that's where you're seeing that increase happen in 2023. This is a chart that I showed last week at the Finance Committee meeting, where when you look at this is showing years down here on the x-axis. The y-axis is showing expenditures per pupil. The yellow section at the very top is our peer average. And just below that, you can see it kind of peek out right there, but there's some green below that. You'll notice that the peer and the state average are very, very close in terms of expenditures per pupil. The red line is showing our county average of expenditures per pupil, and then the blue below it is showing Milford's expenditures per pupil. So we're below the state average, the peer average, and the county average in our expenditures per pupil. Lastly, I would be remiss if I did not put this QR code up again. I'm probably going to do it every forecast presentation I do. Dr. Howard Fleeter did an immense amount of research on school funding, and he continues to do that as well. This QR code will direct you to his website, and you can go out and kind of learn a little bit more about how we got where we are right now with the Fair School Funding Plan. Finally, I just want to say thank you, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them, and this is a QR code that should take you to the Treasurer webpage. Any questions?
Okay, then I guess we need a motion to approve the 5-year forecast as presented.
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion? Call a roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you.
Number 3 is Boyd E. Smith student activity budget. I believe this is for Lego Club at Boyd. As you've seen before, this is a budget that they submit to be able to utilize funds, and you have to approve it before they can.
Okay, we need a motion to approve the fiscal year '24 Boyd E. Smith student activity budgets for the purpose of the Lego Club there at that school.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Call a roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you.
Item number 4 is audiology items for donation or disposal. These were submitted to my office. This is just to take it out of our inventory and to be able to dispose or donate these items.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the audit.
So moved.
Second.
Yeah, still be saying it. Discussion? Call a roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. Moving ahead, we go to item E on our agenda, superintendent's business. Superintendent John Spicer.
Thank you, President Miranda, members of the board. We have a middle school update, have some pictures for you. Is this image 99, Steve? Perfect. So this is digging, forming, and tying rebar for our elevator shaft in Area B of the 3-story academic wing. Go to the next one. Underground plumbing rough ends for Area A of the 3-story academic wing. And we have masonry foundation walls in Area A of the 3-story academic wing. And we have some masonry foundation walls in Area A of the 3-story academic wing as well. And this is the slab for the field house in Building A. And then we have pouring of the locker slab of the new field house in Building A. I think there's one more, Steve, maybe? Or 2 more? That's all it? Okay. Just an update on the auditorium. I was in the auditorium today. They've started to paint black on the walls. It's coming right along. Talked to the construction manager that's in there, and so we're on target. Everything looks great inside there as well, and we'll try to get you some pictures of that as well, and we'll get those out. And then, of course, you'll get the updates that I send on every Friday that we get from Conger on the field house and the middle school. Okay? All right. On to item number 2, asking for your approval to waive the first reading of the policies for approval.
Need a motion to approve, to waive the first reading of policies for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Call a roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you.
Under item 3, we are asking for your approval of the 32 policies as listed. and also to rescind the one policy listed as well.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the policies that are listed here below on your agenda.
So moved.
Second?
Under discussion, I think this is where we talk about how much time we spent going over policies. This is not something that is just a
Yes.
quick hitter and off we go. This is literally hours that we've spent on this over the course of time to get us to the point of approving these.
I think, did you have a comment, John?
I was just going to introduce Mr. Paul Daniels.
Yeah,
Go
please
ahead.
do, because So, Paul, I think it would be helpful, because you're front and center here. I think it'd be helpful to share with the community just a really brief overview of the process by which the board is involved, the OSBA is involved, or is it OSBA? Yeah, that's her, that's her. And the administration is involved, and how these are crafted, updated, and published.
Great, I'd be happy to do so. So every quarter, we get what is called a Policy Development Quarterly. And this Policy Development Quarterly from OSBA really comes out of two things. Most, if not all, are grounded in Ohio Revised Code or Ohio Administrative Code. Most of what's in front of you today comes from the budget bill and House Bill 33. So budget bill that was passed on all the funding across the state, and House Bill 33, which was it's the necessity of significant changes to board policies in the areas of reading. You will probably hear a lot of people say that that's the dyslexia legislation. There are also some policies here due to some findings of the Auditor of State. They are not reflective of practices here or oversteps or overreaches, but across the state, our auditor sort of put some universal guidance in for how school employees can or cannot campaign or show support for a school bond, levy, permanent improvement, anything that we do, earned income tax. So to Mr. Combs's point, the laws are passed. OSBA then goes through their policies, which we are one of the member districts. There's only two organizations in Ohio. There's Neola, there's OSBA. We belong to OSBA. They take a look at all of these 32 policies, most of which are from the PDQ, and then they help to rework those. We bring those to the board. We had a special policy committee meeting. We meet quarterly. Sometimes we might get one randomly due to a change in state law that takes immediate effect. We would usually bring that to finance or building and grounds, where all of our board members typically do attend, and we are grateful that we can have that ability to do that. And then we go through, we ask any questions, we look at what changes. We call those the red lines, green language, red language. Board members have the opportunity to ask questions on interpretation. There's actually one that we're not approving tonight because Mr. Espy wanted to get some more background. It's a cash management policy, and it's went from being very strict to a little more broad, and he likes the stricter policy, so we're looking for some leeway to write that. It's usually on deposits and who can handle cash. Because in House Bill, in the budget bill, for example, we had for many months been collecting tickets for sporting events credit card only. However, on October 1st, when the budget bill went into effect, if you were at one of our events, you would have the ability to buy either a cash purchase or a credit card because of the budget bill. But that being said, I have an amazing colleague, Jen Schaefer, who serves the superintendent, and she has her Juris Doctorate, and the two of us work together to summarize everything, condense it down for the board, and we have an opportunity to discuss, and then we bring it here to have open discussion. But all of this happens through many touch points, and it's not just randomly put in. But we do often say that the board's hands sometimes are, their cards are dealt in a way that the Ohio Revised Code or the Ohio Administrative Code or the budget bill says you have to operate this way. The only one that's on here tonight that's a little different is our drug testing policy is being updated, but that's something that we needed to adjust to. But most of this has to do with the Auditor of State, budget bill, dyslexia legislation, and the district's ability and their interaction in homeschooling, home education, and then the reorganization of the Department of Education and Workforce. You will no longer hear about the Ohio Department of Education. The temporary restraining order was lifted, so they are now the Department of Education and Workforce. 15% of what ODE used to do now goes to the state board, which is, I think, Jenny, licensure, RESA, and Office of Teacher Conduct. Most, if not everything else, will stay with DO, Department of Education and Workforce. And in our preschool, we'll join 7 other agencies, I think, under the Children and Youth Services banner. So I guess this was a really good idea in Columbus, but it now puts our role in 3 different buckets. So yay them. But that's what's here tonight.
So even simpler, and thank you for the work, Paul, because we've spent a lot of time understanding some of these policies that are handed to us. This board and every other school board in the state of Ohio, one of our duties is to create and review and influence particular policies to serve our district better. Some of those again, I don't know if you use the word hands tied, but our hands are tied. Others, we do have the ability to craft and update independently of a state suggestion or whatever the case may be. I think it's a good time. I just want to make it really clear to the community that not one of us personally can create a policy. And a policy is another word for rules. Maybe laws light. But these are rules by which we, the school district, are governed. It's our job with the administration to understand, interpret, and enforce those. And again, on the fringe, we can create and update those. But just understand that if there is a violation of a policy, there's not one of us that can pervert the policy independent of the rest of the board. We have to follow policy. And if there is a violation of a policy, some way, somehow inside of this district, it is brought to the board's attention, and we act accordingly. And what we say is, what does the policy say? That's how we must interpret and act. Not a single one of us here can step aside or do anything outside of policy. And I wanted to make that clear because it's interesting that there's been some discussion around some policies, and almost probably weekly there's a policy that gets challenged inside of our district in one way or the other. And when it's brought to us, we say, what's the policy say? And we interpret it and we communicate that back out to whoever violated the policy. That's it. There's no one person that's above that policy. And I wanted to make that just super clear because I think sometimes folks think that there's people on this board that can supersede policy and really drop a hammer outside of a policy, and that is just not the case. It doesn't happen, it doesn't exist, and it's against the law, candidly. So not a single person here is bigger than the policy that's been written. Is that fair to say, Mr. Daniels?
It is a collective effort. I can think of a few things like the fees and fines regulation. I think where you will see the board have some flexibility is when you are given a policy and you have to write a regulation. So how do you bring that policy to light? And that's where you have a little bit of local control. You see that in the travel and reimbursement, the expense reimbursement tonight, DLC-R in front of you. You see that with all of your input has been given and taken to heart with the drug testing policy, which is probably in its 3rd or 4th iteration as we continue to get it right. And I can probably bet based on the election the other night with issue 2, there will be further guidance for schools because schools are drug-free zones. So I think we will probably see either some new policy or very explicit regulations as well because we are still a school who serves young people. So yes, the board has done I will say of all the boards that we have worked with, we've done the most extensive policy work with the 5 of you, the complete rewrite of the manual, and we are constantly looking at how to improve. And Mr. Miranda always says, have things in one place, and we are finding, and we're going down another project together with handbooks that we are contradicting or people think they cannot supersede board policy. In your guidelines or in your classroom or in your activities, you are not permitted to supersede board policy. It is the governance of the board. So we continue to learn and grow together. And the board has judicious and leeway provided to it in what is given to you. You don't have to carte blanche take unless it's out of Ohio Revised Code or Ohio Administrative Code.
Thanks, a lot of work on your team. Thank you.
I would like to just really quickly thank Mr. Daniels and Ms. Schaefer for spending so much time on this. They really went over and above, making sure that we had all of the information in a very clear manner so that we could have a very efficient meeting and some good focused discussion, so we weren't all over the place. And they were very, very open to working with the board where we had questions or things we wanted to change. And it really has been a team effort. I know that Mr. Daniels always says that. I also appreciate all the expertise that they bring to these policy committees where we can have some good back and forth discussion. This is my first time being on a policy committee and really doing this in a very thorough manner. And they both just made this really easy to understand and an overall really good experience.
Thank you.
You have your comfort dog there to keep you calm. Okay, we have a motion and a second, am I correct?
That's correct.
So any other discussion? Let's call the roll.
Mrs. Nolan,
Yes.
Mrs. Mason,
Yes.
Mr. Combs,
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda.
Yes, thank you. We're going to move ahead to item F, Human Resources Business, Superintendent John Spicer.
Thank you, President Miranda, members of the board. Under Human Resources, asking for your approval of items 1 through 5, and noting that we do have 2 retirees. Patricia Bolander, 35 years of service to the district, and Mr. Tom Kilgore with 34 years of service to the district, retiring at the end of the year.
Okay, we have items 1 through 5. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion?
A quick thank you again, John. I know you brought it up, but to Ms. Bolander and Mr. Kilgore, thank you for your service. It's a long time at work, and I hope you enjoy every minute of your retirement.
Okay. Any other discussion? Let's call the roll.
Mrs. Nolan,
Yes.
Mrs. Mason,
Yes.
Mr. Combs,
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda.
Yes, thank you. Moving ahead to item G, Curriculum and Instruction Business, Superintendent John Spicer.
Thank you, President Miranda, members of the board, asking for your approval of curriculum pay, items A, B, and C.
Need a motion to approve curriculum pay as outlined in the agenda.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion?
This is the point in every meeting that I just want to make sure that everyone knows that every one of these line items have been openly discussed in our Personnel Committee meeting last week. The administration's always open to give their feedback if we have questions about some of these line items, because again, there's a lot of personnel here that we just approved in lines 1 through 5, and there's a handful more here in curriculum pay. So I use the word bobblehead when you see us all saying yay or nay here. Just know that we vetted this last week.
Okay, any other discussion? Call the roll.
Mrs. Nolan,
Yes.
Mrs. Mason,
Yes.
Mr. Combs.
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda.
Yes, thank you.
Under item 2, asking for your acceptance of the donation of books, The Foster Kid, by Milford grad of 2008, Jeremy Collier.
Okay, need a motion to accept the donation as outlined in your agenda.
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Spicer, do you have anything else to add about this individual?
This young man, Jeremy, is the author as well. So he's also donating. So he has signed the copies, and it's a great story.
So we can have first edition signed copies in our
something like that.
library,
yes.
something like that.
And it's his journey as being in foster care.
Yes, sir.
And, it's pretty inspirational, actually, so.
Okay, any other discussion? Call roll.
Mrs. Nolan,
Yes.
Mrs. Mason,
Yes.
Mr. Combs,
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda.
Yes, thank you. Moving on to item H, business operations, Superintendent John Spicer.
Thank you, President Miranda, members of the board, asking for your approval to deem transportation impractical for item number 1.
I need a motion to approve transportation of the individual listed here as impractical.
So moved.
Second.
That was 3 seconds, that's good. Any discussion? Call roll.
Mrs. Nolan,
Yes.
Mrs. Mason,
Yes.
Mr. Combs,
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda.
Yes, thank you. Moving on to our second public participation. Do we have anyone?
I don't have any. Oh, sorry.
You do now.
Is it, what's your last name, sir? Hayes, okay. We have Mr. Keith Hayes.
Yep.
Did Paul leave the mic on?
Well, thank you for hearing me. I'll try and keep this pretty short. You know, with the levy not passing, I took a kind of a quick dive in, looking at the auditor's site. Our school administrative and general administration and fiscal business budgeting in 2019 was 5.4 million. In 2020, it jumped to 7.3 million. For 2021, 7.6 million. Now, I know with COVID, that makes sense that things are just going to be screwy, but is that something that is going to be continuing to rise up, or is it going to drop back down to the original levels? I mean, I think that's something the board members might be interested in looking into. The second thing I noted tonight, based on the Mason busing cost versus our busing cost, you know, maybe a phone call to Mason to figure out how they're doing it, because their cost is $5,883,000 if they had our student population, where we're at 7.014 million. So there's a differential there. If we could get down to about their cost per rider, down to, you know, that $892.22, you're looking at a savings of $1.176 million per year, just right there alone. So maybe some things you guys might want to look into.
Okay, someone will reach out?
Yeah, we'll definitely continue. I mean, we're looking at every cost, but we appreciate your analysis, and we'll definitely look at that.
Anyone else?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. We now go to open discussion with the board.
I wanted to, if you didn't know, there was an election this week.
There was.
I knew very well. And I just wanted to thank the community for the vote of confidence to come back and serve for 4 more years. I hope to build on the experience. I think the other board members would agree it takes at least 2 to learn. You know, I mean, like, there's just so much learning in those first 4 years because so much of it is new. So I look forward to that. I also look forward to OSBA conference next week. Hope to see some of my board colleagues there in Columbus to learn about what else we can do for financing and for budgeting and for curriculum and that sort of stuff.
I wanted to make a couple comments to the community at large. I got a phone call on Saturday. Someone told me, because I actually don't go on Facebook that often, but someone's like, oh, you better jump on the Milford page because you and Jerry are getting creamed on there. So most people know there's been an issue regarding a program for the past couple months, and somehow in the community it's become Jerry and my fault and problem, and we're the cause of it. So I just wanted to establish a couple things that the board can and can't do. What the board's purpose is, the board has a couple directed jobs, and that's directed by the OSBA and ORC codes. The board is in charge of creating, writing, modifying, altering policy, hiring the superintendent and the treasurer, and holding those two positions accountable for fulfilling the policies that they put in place. That's it. Those are the three jobs of the board. Everything is baked into the policies. We have a district of over 800 employees and 6,000 kids. If we had a just random go as you may, go by the day, see how we feel kind of operation, it would be a disaster. We would be lawsuit driven. Policies are the rules of the district. The board has only two positions that they oversee or that they can hold accountable, and that's those two. No students, no coaches, no teachers, nobody else. So we actually have policies, and you guys can look them up if you want. Policy CA is called the Administrative Goals Policy, and that says that the schools are a single system guided by board policies implemented through the superintendent. So the board decides on policies, and it is up to the superintendent to implement them, and that means down the chain from them. Through the chain of command, the policies trickle down. We also have a policy, CH, called policy implementation that requires all board employees, that means everyone hired in the district, and students to follow board policies. So I've read on Facebook, and if anyone is on there, get your popcorn, because there's a lot of comments of collectively people losing their minds. But it all comes down to the policies. And I know there's a whole thread about feelings, like, well, we feel these people are upset and these people are upset and they're hurt and blah, blah, blah. We had a situation where some students quit a team on their own accord, and there we have policy, and that's fine, they can do that. That is up to, anyone can quit anything they want. But we have policies that address that situation. And it seems that those people have lost their mind that the policies are now being enforced. So I don't know what to say about that, other than everybody signs off on handbooks. Everyone signs off, parents and kids, on athletic handbooks. And we have policies that are all online. So that's the way it works. We can't arbitrarily change policies for this group or that group or these sad people or these upset people. People make choices, they do them on their own accord, and then we have policies that we as the board, we're not involved in the minutia of the district, the day-to-day operations. We don't hire, fire anyone, we don't hire coaches, we don't interview them, we don't have anything to do with it. The only thing we do is approve them if they show up on these sheets. That's all our involvement is. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Is there's clearly people in a tailspin when they have no idea what they're talking about. So read up on the policies, and then that will be good for everyone.
I am glad you brought up the policies and handbooks, because that's something we talked about tonight with Mr. Daniels. It is something that came up, that there is a difference between policies and handbooks, and we are working to make sure that the handbooks ladder up to our policies. They currently do not in some areas, and we're making sure, we're doing that hard work to make sure that everything is all in alignment.
And that was the comment of you only have the policy one place. You don't rewrite it in a handbook. You refer back to it. So that's just good policy anywhere. So if you change one thing and you don't change the other one, then you've got something that's out of whack with one another. So that was the crux of what Paul was saying.
Yeah, the interesting thing, and I'm not on Facebook, and I haven't forever, so it's really difficult for me to defend myself in a form that I think is a borderline joke. You know, my family's been personally attacked in the past few months about a particular situation, and you know, policy is what it is. If I had an issue with something with my daughter and a coaching staff years ago, I would have addressed it directly with the coach. I would have addressed it directly with the athletic director at the time. I would have at least had a sit down, a conversation, and none of that happened. The very clear story is my daughter did not make a cheer squad her sophomore year at Milford. And we were saddened by that. And I had a conversation with her, and some of you out there as parents may have had children that didn't make a team. And it's tough. And my conversation with her was, you have 364 days to get better. It's a tough decision. It's a life lesson. Let's go work harder and go make that team. Not one phone call, not one text, not one meeting. This was 3 years ago did I ever have. And the fact that there's a group of parents, a very small group of parents in this community that feel like this board member has a vendetta against a former coach that I've never met in my life is a farce. It's an untruth. And I'm not on Facebook, but I'll stand forever with how I manage my family, how I coach my daughter to deal with tough lessons, and there hasn't been one complaint because of it. We took the time, and I took the time to address it briefly tonight because it's been pretty painful. I don't follow Facebook, but when I see the attacks, especially on my daughter, it's bothersome. And anyone that has children, if your children are attacked and they make complaints about the fact that I have a vendetta because she didn't make the team, it's an outright lie, an untruth, and never happened. So I hope that we can pick up and move on from some of this. There'll be some in the community that will continue to talk about it because they like to do that. They get really interested in harassment and very interested in stirring things. They must enjoy that type of work in their lives. I choose to spend my time differently than on Facebook as a keyboard warrior. There's only a handful of offenders out there. I know exactly who they are. And it's a shame that they spend so much time attacking me and my family. That's all I'll have to say about it. We've moved on from this toxic situation. I applaud the administration for taking the time to address the situation and move on to a more positive one for the rest of that team. That's all I have, Dave.
Anyone else? Emily, you go, John?
Yes,
We've heard from everyone.
Dave, let me do something before your good news report.
Yes, sir.
Please. Tomorrow is a No Internet Friday at Milford. We recently identified unauthorized activity on our network. We immediately implemented our response protocols, took measures to contain the activity, and launched an investigation. A cybersecurity firm that has helped other organizations with similar matters has been engaged. We have been in communication with law enforcement and are supporting its investigation. If you get emails from us, it's in your inbox. I'm just reading what's there for those that maybe
Can't send
don't.
an email.
Yep, as a precautionary measure, the district has disabled our internet access through at least Friday. School remains open, and tomorrow's Veteran Day events will continue as planned. And if parents need to contact their teacher or school, please call rather than email. And phone numbers can be found at milfordschools.org on each of the schools' page through that staff directory. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's do some good news here. I've just got a couple of items here tonight, and it's one of the first nights that somebody has not done these, so this is good. Yesterday afternoon, 11 Milford High School senior athletes participated in an early signing ceremony at the high school gymnasium. Just congratulations to each one of those each one of those athletes as they continue their athletic career at the collegiate level. So we're really excited for them. Earlier this month, 4 Milford Junior High students spoke at the request of the Ohio Federation of Soil and Water Conservation at their district educator workshop. Their topic was turtle telemetry. Let that soak in for a second. The students discussed how they tracked turtles' travels and what they do with the data that they get from that. The sponsor of this group is Rochelle Dickerson, teacher at the junior high. Congratulations to each one of those students, and to Mrs. Dickinson. That's a great opportunity for them to get up and speak to a group like that. Third, Mr. Kaufman is not here tonight because he is over in the Montgomery Indian Hill area for the final production of Clue. They're completing a 6-show run tonight. I went to the show on Monday with my wife, and it's one of the best shows I've ever seen here at Milford. The atmosphere there, the food, the mocktails, if you will, everything was just amazing. What a great experience for not only for the kids but for the audience that actually got to go. Congratulations to Dave Derringer, who's their director, and both casts that performed. Yeah, they double casted this show. If you missed it, you really missed an awesome performance. But Matilda is coming up in the spring as we open our new theater. Dates to remember. Well, this is kind of a half date, half good news. The Milford Marching Band performed earlier today at Bands of America in Indianapolis. Word that I've gotten from the street is that they had their best performance of the year, and they will find out tomorrow if they made the semifinals. So we're waiting on pins and needles and hope that they're going to make that. The Milford Craft Show is scheduled for December 2nd from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. at the high school. And I mean, at the high school means all over the high school. Those of you who have been there know what I mean. There's over 200 crafters. They'll be selling their wares throughout the high school. It's the largest craft show in Southwest Ohio. Milford Flight Night is scheduled for Thursday, March 14th, 2024. This event's organized by the Milford Athletic Boosters with the proceeds going to Milford Athletics. This year's guest speakers are Baseball Hall of Famer Tony Perez and Reds great Davey Concepcion. Tickets will go on sale sometime shortly after the first of the year. It's a great event, so plan to attend it. That is all that I have. That was short.
Dave, I just want one more piece of good news, and I'm sorry to keep everybody, but everyone knows that we had a football team that had an amazing season this year. It came to an earlier end than we had hoped for. I know some of those seniors on that team personally, and some that I don't know, but I know how tough it is as a senior in high school to walk away from a season like this and have it end so early. So just a quick salute to that entire football team, all the players, coaching, extended staff that played such a big role in supporting them. The fans have been amazing all year long, and I don't know, just a big tip of the cap to an amazing season from this team. You guys have nothing really to hang your head about on a tough loss last week.
And they were 11-1, and that's a great season by any level. We also had the soccer team that reached the regional semifinals, the girls soccer team. Another great year. They did not have a loss until that loss at the regional level. I think that's the same thing that happened last year. We made it to the regionals undefeated, a couple of ties in there. Great group of kids. I know several of them were honored yesterday over at the gym as they're going to go on and play college soccer. So it's exciting, and I know Coach Jill will just reload, and we'll be back next year probably at the regionals. So
another phenomenal squad, the girls softball. Those seniors have had success at every level that they've come up, and a big salute to those girls.
And thank you for reminding me. I was trying to do this last minute here with no internet, and it took a little while.
You're usually all over it, Dave.
Thank God for hotspots. Okay, the next regular board meeting is Thursday, December the 14th, 2023, in this room. That is at 1099 State Route 131, Milford, Ohio, 45140. The meeting starts at 6 p.m. I need a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
I'm guessing we won't have any discussion, so Mr. Espy, would you one more time call the roll, please?
Mrs. Nolan,
Yes.
Mrs. Mason,
Yes.
Mr. Combs,
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda.
Yes, thank you and good night.